The final battle. This was indeed the true final battle, whether be it for Zheng or clone Zheng. Whether it was for revenge or the conviction to live on, the enmity between the two would be resolved in this final battle. Do you know? I used to hate you a lot. That's why I killed you in Resident Evil Apocalypse, and exterminated all of your comrades. Clone Zheng's expression was calm the entire time, but Zheng was able to see turbulent emotions within that calmness. It wasn't any positive emotion like the so-called love, friendship, or familial affection. It was instead a difficult to describe malice, ruthlessness, and rage. If it was an ordinary person standing in front of him, these negative emotions would be sufficient to drive that person insane. Clone Zheng was bearing this sort of emotions as he fought Zheng. Yes, it left a deep impression on me. The blow that time nearly broke me completely. Fortunately, I have many trustworthy comrades. Relying on them, I finally reached this step. My clone, this day is the day we resolve it all. Clang. Zheng's tiger soul and that broadsword wreathed in black flames collided, and the enormous force transformed into shockwaves that surged outwards. The ground was rent apart, and even the black flames around clone Zheng trembled violently. At this moment, Zheng had already fully entered dragon transformation, and his physical attributes had skyrocketed. He was also using the true destruction now, and his speed and power were far beyond an ordinary person's imagination. Every casual strike carried enormous power with it. Something like cleaving off a hill's peak off was now incredibly effortless. When their weapons collided, not only did Zheng not retreat, but he even raised his sword and slammed it onto clone Zheng's broadsword again. The two strikes weren't even 0.1 seconds apart, and the two enormous forces merged into one, generating an even greater force that pushed clone Zheng 100 meters away. You can't escape. Zheng roared, as he stomped on the ground, causing the ground to crack. He rushed towards above clone Zheng's head in an instant, sending Tiger Soul slashing downwards. With such speed and power, clone Zheng wouldn't be able to effortlessly block it like before regardless of how fast his reaction time was. This thought ran through Zheng's mind, and he exerted more force into his hand. But just as Tiger Soul was about to hit clone Zheng, there was another loud collision as the broadsword once again protected clone Zheng's head. The force transmitted over from the broadsword wasn't one whit inferior to Zheng's destruction. Zheng could only helplessly be forced backwards, as he lacked the spare strength to attack clone Zheng. Clone Zheng's expression didn't change, as if what had just occurred was something insignificant. He sneered coldly as he held his broadsword. You actually think the title of the Apex can be obtained so easily by you? If you don't have the resolve to die, don't even think of seizing it. The resolve to die? Zheng roared loudly, I've long since had it. Even if I die after this fight, I won't lose to you. My comrades and I had a promise. We'll make Team China stand at the peak of this realm and become the strongest. They've already paid such a huge price, so I have to win. The ropes on your wrist? How dumb. Clone Zheng didn't stop sneering coldly as he pointed at the ropes. Based on the number, more or less every member of Team China was there already. Only 2 or 3 were left on their living owner's wrist. Some insignificant ants can't fight back against humans even if they stake their life on it. As a team leader, did you drag along your team in this madness of yours? You're still rather childish. Shut up. Zheng flashed past again, as Tiger Soul frenziedly assaulted clone Zheng. Every strike produced great noise, even the first causing the earth to crack. The two had reached an inhuman level of power. Don't you dare mock my comrades. They're my best war buddies, my best comrades. They fought by my side, not complaining even in death. They may not be the strongest. They may have their own past. They may be incomplete in spirit. But they've been trying their best. They're strong people who've been trying to uphold their conviction step by step. They're nothing like you, a weakling with only power, but whose heart is so fragile it's in a mess. Outside of hate, what else do you have? Zheng madly attacked continuously with Tiger's Soul, every strike forcing clone Zheng a large step back. However, Zheng found it strange that no matter how fast he attacked and what direction he attacked from, that broadsword would always block him even though clone Zheng never turned his head back. This situation was incomprehensible to Zheng. Could it be that clone Zheng's reflexes could keep up with dragon transformation with destruction? What sort of monster is he? He not only possesses the Sin Flames with unlimited power, but his body also rivals my destruction. Someone almost perfect like this, actually exists. As Zheng spoke, clone Zheng, as well as the endless black flames, abruptly came to a stop. With clone Zheng as the center, an indescribably tyrannical pressure burst out, while his eyes abruptly turned bloodshot. You, my original, really deserve to die. You actually don't know what pain is. Sin Flames, tornado. Clone Zheng said coldly. The endless black flames in his surroundings gathered with a wave of his hand, forming a 10-meter wide tornado of black flames. It seemed material, its pitch black body not letting light through as it moved towards Zheng. Zheng wasn't afraid, and said as he watched the Sin Flame tornado approach, were you so embarrassed you got angry? What pain is? Is the pain you gave me in Resident Evil Apocalypse any less so? Zheng used Saru, quickly dodging to the side at a speed difficult to follow with the eyes. Seeing how slow the Sin Flame tornado was, it didn't matter how powerful it was if it couldn't touch him. But just as he ran a few meters, a broadsword wreathed in black flames was suddenly in his path. Its appearance was so sudden and Zheng had no idea when it had appeared. Zheng was currently in destruction, and be it his speed, power, or reaction speed, they all far surpassed a human's. He himself had experienced 100 battles, so he didn't panic even when intercepted while at Saru's speed. He simply stomped down, and when the ground cracked apart, he borrowed the force to move backwards. However, just as Zheng moved another few meters again, there was suddenly an intense heat rushing over from behind his hand. He didn't need to turn around to sense that it was a broadsword wreathed in black flames. Two broadswords had simultaneously appeared in front and behind him. He subconsciously looked at Clone Zheng, and yet there was a broadsword in his hand as well. And to Zheng, the strangest thing was, Clone Zheng wasn't looking at him, but rather position he had been standing at before he used Saru. I understand. So that's what's going on. Sin flames, they really are terrifying. Zheng was enlightened. For him who had undergone 100 battles, his battle experience was incredibly rich and wouldn't be any less even compared to his clone. He immediately understood the mystery of Clone Zheng's sin flames in this exchange, especially when two broadswords appeared. This sin flame was even more miraculous than he imagined. It took but an instant. The two times Zheng tried to retreat, he would be intercepted by broadswords wreathed in black flames. Now, 5 had already appeared, left, right, front, back and above. They all formed a 5-direction blockade against Zheng. No matter how great his power was, he couldn't break them. No matter how fast he was, he couldn't dodge them. The broadsword seemed to have precognizance, able to always know his intentions and force him back to the same position. When the Sinflame tornado reached, Zheng was finally swallowed inside. After swallowing Zheng, the tornado left the ground and spun an electric drill spinning madly in the air. As it erupted with a shocking suction force, the tornado gathered a horrifyingly high temperature that wasn't any lower than the surface of the sun. Everything within kilometers of it began to melt and soften, and the ground closest to it had already become bright red magma. It wasn't enough even with the omnidirectional Samsara formation's protection. Clone Zheng's power was too terrifying, and the fortified ground wasn't able to withstand it. It seemed that this several hundred meters tall cylindrical pillar battlefield would collapse sooner or later. Within a second or two of being sucked in, Zheng felt his body being pulled at by enormous forces. His body would be ripped to shreds sooner or later regardless of how resilient his dragon transformation was. His body already had blisters and burns. It had to be known that his dragon transformation would only feel pain and not be hurt even if it took a direct hit from an artillery shell. It was unexpected that he was already getting burnt within a mere 1 or 2 seconds inside the Sinflame tornado. Wouldn't anyone else be incinerated just from getting close to it? Crimson flames began to surge on Zheng's body without hesitation. It wasn't one of the manifestations of light of the soul, but just a vampire skill. However, it had the peculiar effect of resisting high temperatures. He had tested it out in Resident Evil Apocalypse, except that the black flame then hadn't been as powerful as it was now, capable of liquefying metal and scorching the earth, with nothing that couldn't be melted. As expected, the red flame only persisted for 2 seconds before being completely burnt and assimilated by the black flames. It was strange, how could flames be burnt? However, that was what had happened. Perhaps, this was what was truly the flames of destruction that could burn anything and everything. Zheng no longer dared hesitate when he saw the red flame defeated. The refined chi and magic in his body gathered at his body's surface, while 2 streams of energy, one black and one white, appeared in both his palms. When he joined his palms together, the 2 streams of energy merged into a sphere. The sphere created didn't display the colors black and white however, and was instead a hazy chaotic mass. Countless minute auras continuously distorted and transformed within, as if lightning was streaking within it. Zheng didn't overthink it as he tossed the sphere at the ground. 1. While in his hands, the sphere was only the size of an egg. However, it immediately grew to the size of a basketball as soon as it escaped his grasp, and it continued to swell up while the reactions and aura within got more and more violent. The sphere burst apart when it hit the ground, the chaotic mass at first of 2 colors, black and white, before becoming multi-hued, and finally turning into incandescent radiance before it proceeded to violently explode. Shockwaves continuously assailed the area, the ground for hundreds of meters around pulverized. The scene was more chaotic and indistinct the closer to the center it was, and the messed up ground looked like when heaven and earth had been separated, and the elements of earth, water, wind, and fire were seething. The tornado of black flames wasn't ordinary of course, and apart from the section near the ground vanishing in an instant from this attack, the vast majority of it was merely shaken into dispersing. The 5 broadswords dispersed into black flames, gathering around Clone Zheng once more in the form of that endless sea of fire. Ah, I escaped it? It's just that the consumption of this move is too much. Although it isn't fighting with all I have like Chaos, Genesis Splitter, its refined chi and magic expenditure is over 10 times as much. I've lost at least 10%. I need to use it more prudently. Zheng sighed when he broke free of the tornado, the self-restorative ability of the dragon transformation operating and the not too severe injuries becoming fine after a few breaths of time. At the same time, he used Saru several times and escaped the area of pulverized ground, landing on firm ground. No wonder. You really are my original. With just the slight pain from Resident Evil Apocalypse, and that narrow-mindedness of yours, you were able to reach this level. It really is fate. You may truly be the main character of this generation. Clone Zheng looked at the gradually vanishing center of that chaos, sighing after a while. That slight pain. Zheng was immediately greatly angered, as he had always bore a grudge over this matter. Although Clone Zheng had put it unpleasantly, that battle really had been the impetus for him to become strong. The pain from that battle was what had led him to slowly crave power, and slowly become strong, until today, where he had the power to challenge Clone Zheng for the title of the strongest. Clone Zheng had relied on pain and hatred as well to become strong. Perhaps, pain and hatred really was the impetus to become strong. No. Pain and revenge aren't the true impetus to become strong. That was only a superficial strength. Zheng had long since conquered his heart's devil, and he had even overcome it by sacrificing his body. His willpower had long since become unshakable, and unable to be corrupted by evil. Although his heart had wavered for a moment, it was still only for a moment. His willpower had immediately decided that there was nothing wrong with what he upheld. It wasn't like fourth stagers who hadn't overcome the heart's devil. They would easily enter the heart's devil state when their conviction was broken. With how resolute Zheng and Clone Zheng's willpower was, even the illusions created by Adam's human instrumentality project wouldn't be able to confuse them. Adam would have to use force to attack them if he wanted to attack. That was why Adam had first intended to absorb everyone around him before looking for the two Zhengs. Adam understood himself and others clearly. The so-called pain and hatred is nothing more than being hurt by those people or things dear to you. For example, my comrades, and Lori, Yingkong's memories and elder brother, Heng's lover Ming Yanwei, or Wangzia's country. Pain and hatred that is engraved in your bones and etched in your heart can only come when it's related to her from things related to your convictions. It's only when you've endured this pain and hatred that many people will start to madly desire power. So, while it does seem at first glance that possessing power is brought about by pain and hatred, it's actually from upholding your conviction. The deeper your conviction is engraved, the more power you'll gain after being hurt. My conviction, and his conviction that has completely changed into hatred and madness, which is stronger? Zheng's expression was solemn. I know your pain and hatred. But I'm not able to help you. All I can do is fight you fairly. Let victory or defeat be decided by our power. Is my conviction stronger or your pain and hatred? I chose a completely different path from you in terms of power. The attack just now was a fusion of refined chi and magic, a mimicry of when yin and yang hadn't been separated and everything was in chaos. I named this move chaos. But that's not my true chaos. How about it? Show your sin flame's true power. Force me to use my killing move chaos. Don't tell me your sin flame is as simple as burning. If that's it, how did those 5 broadswords appear and attack? Sin flame is both material and immaterial at the same time. It's a manifestation of the cruelty in my heart, and is related to the psyche. Unless you have firm willpower and won't be corrupted by evil, you'll suffer the corrosion of the heart's devil inside even if you don't get incinerated, slowly trapped in yourself unto death. Cruelty is born from the heart, and it can be in the shape of flames, swords, sabers, or anything. As soon as any intent forms in your heart, whether killing intent or excitement, it'll cause a reaction in my sin flames. I admit that destructive light of yours is already much too fast and powerful for me. I can't react to it, but that doesn't mean intent isn't able to. As long as you form the intent to do anything, my sin flames will automatically produce a reaction to block you. Clone Zheng paused here, before continuing, perhaps you really are qualified to force me to go all out. No one has been able to accomplish that to this day. Try your best. That's so? Should I be feeling honored then? Zheng laughed coldly, rushing over to Clone Zheng with Saru. He slashed out with Tiger's Soul. The light emitted by the saber wasn't the mistiness of refined chi nor the great sense of presence magic had won. It was instead chaotic and indistinct, and was like a fog that couldn't be seen through. In the beginning, Zheng had used refined chi for Tiger's Soul. When he obtained magic, he switched to that instead, and its power was much greater. As his level continued to rise, he had obtained the ability to control refined chi and magic after Xian had helped him successfully establish his foundation. Although he couldn't modify chaos into an instant chaos the same way he did with destruction and instant destruction, just pouring in refined chi and magic and letting them mix was much more powerful than any of the two alone. The concept behind it was similar to the magic cannon, which was why its power was so boundless. Tiger's Soul didn't have any tricks behind it, but a mere horizontal sweep. Its power and speed were inconceivable, and with this simplified chaos behind it, it really did embody the concept of a heavy sword not relying on its edge, but on its wielder's skill. No matter how many tricks you had, I could just use force to break through it all. As expected, the broadsword in Clone Zheng's hands shattered upon contact, while the man himself was knocked several hundred meters back. As Zheng was about to give chase, the endless black flames abruptly gathered together again, forming swords, sabers, spears, bows, hammers, axes and whips. The number of types of weapons immediately encircling him didn't stop at merely 10. There were at least 100 of these weapons that all had black flames surging on them. Their aura wasn't any inferior than that broadsword. Zheng gulped when he saw himself trapped. Fuck, is he still a human? I needed so much power to break one broadsword, and now there are over 100 of them. Is his light of the soul infinite? Sin flames, burial mound of 100 armaments. Clone Zheng rose to his feet, and gestured to the 100 black flame weapons, causing the weapons to descend. This wasn't like the tornado that was a congregation of normal black flames, but actual material objects manifested through black flames. Its might was over 100 times greater. Zheng in destruction was able to take the first 3 or 4, but 10 or 20 proceeded to rain down. If he used refined chi or magic to receive them, they instead exploded violently in response. Just a few explosions left half of his dragon-transformed body injured. Gradually, he was no longer able to endure it. Chaos. Chaos, Genesis Splitter. Zheng's refined chi speedily flowed up from the Violet Palace in his dantian while his magic quickly flowed down from his head. The two energies with diametrically opposed attributes interacted in his heart, and an inconceivably mighty power burst out from his body. Not even his body in dragon transformation could endure it, and it began to collapse. However, power was still power, and this inconceivably mighty power was still used by Zheng in the end. An enormous power permeated Tiger's soul, and he brandished it a single time in attack, sending dozens of weapons flying, which began to crumble into black flames once more in the face of this enormous power. The remaining weapons didn't even have a chance to continue the assault, before Zheng merely took a single step forward. The ground disintegrated from the impact of the step, and the air currents that sprung up like a hurricane blew away the weapons. At the same moment, Zheng had rushed to clone Zheng, his saber sweeping horizontally at his clone. In the world the teams experienced, those who only had speed and power were akin to hired thugs, and were even just second or third-rate thugs. If you wanted to become strong, you need to improve your enhancements or grasp your own skills, such as assassination skills. However, when something was developed to an extreme, things would develop in the opposite way. When speed and power surpassed the limits of your imagination and reached a level where it couldn't be described with words, it would become a true killing move no enhancement of skill could withstand. It was like that with Zheng's Chaos, Genesis Splitter. Moving his arm or leg was like separating the heavens and the earth, possessing awesome power. Even that wondrous sin flame of clone Zheng couldn't obstruct it. If he didn't have a move of the same level, clone Zheng would die for certain. As Tiger's soul approached his body, the black flames around clone Zheng transformed in response to Zheng's killing intent. However, it didn't create material objects like weapons this time round, instead converting itself into a pure black substance that was even darker than the black flames. The meters-thick black flames only produced a membrane that was only 1 to 2 millimeters thick. Tiger's soul hacked at this membrane, but its tenacity was shocking. The infinitely powerful attack was able to penetrate it, but was unable to rip it to shreds. Instead, the saber lost power, losing it all within a short half a second. However, Zheng didn't panic. He released Tiger's soul's handle, using the freed-up hand to unleash a punch at the ripped portion of the membrane. Although the punch was robbed of much power after passing through the membrane, the remaining force still slammed into clone Zheng's right shoulder, vaporizing half his body. The power of Chaos, Genesis Splitter really was of the sort that separated the heavens and the earth. A fist with only 40 to 50% of its strength left disintegrated half of clone Zheng's body as well as the black flames outside his body that had been newly created. His remains were sent hundreds of meters away, crashing onto the ground, his life or death unknown. Zheng had intended to pursue, but the membrane that was made of an unknown material actually produced a massive suction force that pulled him in. He could only helplessly retreat with Tiger's soul in tow, but in this brief moment, endless black flames were already burning where clone Zheng's remains were. In the legends of old, the phoenix could resurrect from flames. Sin flames can create anything and everything, including my body. Good job, very strong. My original, you can be proud that you forced me to this stage. Then, as respect for your power and conviction, I shall show you. Primordial Dusk. The title of the strongest. All those who had unlocked the third stage had their own unique style of fighting. Their combat power had already surpassed the bounds of normal humans. In general, these outstanding people would be able to take on an army if they went back to the real world, or at bare minimum an army division. Of course, there were some specific outliers who excelled in single combat and were lacking when pitted against large numbers. Still, the third stage was a rough gauge of if they were qualified. Of course, it wasn't absolute, with certain people below the third stage possessing large quantities of exchanged equipment, enhancements, and weapons being strong as well. Thus, the third stage was merely a qualification and not an absolute advantage. As for the fourth stagers, that was the true benchmark of if a team had entered the big leagues. Anyone at that stage was a first-rate powerhouse and would be part of the main combat force regardless of which team they joined. People of this level in the realm wouldn't exceed 20. They stood at the peak of the realm and could look down on anyone weaker than them, even if it was an entire team. Clone Zheng existed in this strata, and was an unrivaled powerhouse. This was definitely amazing, especially in Team Devil that existed on the Law of the Jungle. It was unthinkable to be titled as the realm's strongest in such a team if you didn't have real power to back it up. After all, the team had the perverted Zhao Zuokang who would randomly pick a fight with you. To steadily carry this title with such a person by his side, it was obvious that this title was no exaggeration and Clone Zheng lived up to it. Zheng himself had experienced countless fights and life and death trials. He had obtained the qualifications to challenge Clone Zheng by continuously becoming stronger step by step, as well as every change, effort, emotion, and hard work. However, it was merely a qualification, AMD he couldn't guarantee he could kill Clone Zheng even if he used Chaos, Genesis Splitter. The over 100 black flame weapons really did have incredible power, and anyone slightly weaker who got surrounded would surely have died. However, this level was too weak for Clone Zheng who was titled the strongest. As expected, when Zheng used Chaos, Genesis Splitter, it was unrivaled against others that didn't belong to the same tier of power. He easily broke apart the 100 weapons, and struck Clone Zheng for the first time. The injuries he suffered were enough to kill any ordinary person. However, who could have known that when Clone Zheng was burned by the black flames, his injuries would recover in an instant? Not even a trace of blood could be seen on him. Of course, it wouldn't have been much if that was it. Zheng had an unshakable confidence in the power of his Chaos, Genesis Splitter. Everything had its limits, and no matter how powerful a self-restorative ability was, all that had to be done to kill Clone Zheng was to attack faster and fiercer than the regeneration. However, the move that Clone Zheng used to uphold his title of the strongest, Primordial Dusk, Universe Armageddon, had appeared. The surrounding black flames all quickly integrated into the black membrane that had blocked Tiger's soul before, making it bigger and bigger. However, the black membrane was made of some unknown composition, which the endless black flames were only able to transform into a tiny bit of black membrane. When practically all of the black flames had been converted, there was only a meter-sized black sphere left. It was dark and lightless, and any nearby light rays would distort and be sucked in, while the rocks on the ground were picked up and dragged into the sphere. The sphere itself shrank until it reached the size of a ping-pong ball, when it abruptly collapsed inwards and a black hole that tore through space appeared there. It wasn't the black hole in astronomy, but merely a black color giant hole where the inside couldn't be seen. It was 4 to 5 meters tall and 3 to 4 meters wide. It simply stayed there ripping through space, giving those who looked at it the shivers. This is my gift to you, a power that makes even me shudder. Let me just say this. I have to beat you within 10 minutes or I won't be able to control this power and it'll grow into an actual black hole. No one else can survive outside of me, and I don't think you want that either. Clone Zheng muttered to his original. For some reason, perhaps Zheng was seeing things, but he felt like he could detect a trace of loneliness in his clone's eyes. Would loneliness appear in the eyes of the strongest, who had unwavering willpower? Excellent. My Chaos, Genesis Splitter, can't be maintained for long either. Since this is both our special moves, there's no need to say anything more. Come. My clone, this is the last power I have to face you. Zheng inhaled a deep breath, before giving a loud roar as he charged at his clone, while wielding Tiger's soul. Ah, how lonely, Zheng faintly heard these words from his clone, but he didn't have time to consider it. He borrowed the incomparable speed from Chaos, Genesis Splitter to rush over, flashing past that strange black hole as he reached Clone Zheng. Pouring enormous power into Tiger's soul, it slashed towards Clone Zheng. The climax of the realms battle to determine the strongest team and strongest individual had been reached. The curtain was about to fall, and Team China and Team Devil's top-level combatants had already suffered grave losses. Apart from the missing Hao Tian, the only ones left who could influence the conclusion aside from the Zhengs were the Xians. This was also the worst possible conclusion of the king versus king and soldiers against soldiers battle. Both sides being annihilated. Equal again, as expected, Clone Xian's expression flickered, before he said to Xian a few seconds later. No, it's not equal again. It'll definitely be equal. Fighting like this is the only way to be a true final battle, and the only way to conform to its objective. Xian suddenly looked at the sky as he said. The two were floating in the air as before, with a woman, Zhang Xiaoxiu, who was carrying the God Seal board, besides Clone Xian. Half an hour had passed since the start of their battle. It was obvious how exhausted they were from the Xian's hair that was half white as well as the new wrinkles on his face, and Zhang Xiaoxiu's pale expression. Clone Xian gave his original a deep look, before saying, the only way to conform. The God Seal board told me that you have cultivation technologies, so knowing this isn't surprising. By the way, how much life force do you have to squander? How old is your body? 40s? 50s? Or 60s? How about you? How many causality points do you have? How strong is the world's rejection that you're suffering? If normal disasters can't offset it, will an asteroid fall on you? Or will you be directly driven out from this plane by an infinitely huge rejection force? I wonder what your choice is. Xian didn't hesitate to immediately ask. All possible. But what makes me curious is, you've been making the Bell of the East Emperor absorb the energy freely flowing in the air this whole time. Apart from a portion you're using to replenish life force, the majority of it is being saved. What do you plan to do? Let me guess, you intend to interfere with the final battle's outcome. Clone Xian opened his mouth. That's what I'm curious about too. I can't know about how many causality points you have left, but why is the woman behind you starting to save energy in her body? What are you trying to do? Xian asked immediately. Oh, is that so? Clone Xian actually looked to be even more surprised, and he gave Zhang Xiaoxiu a silent look as he maintained his composure. He continued, I don't need to do much anymore now. Clone Zheng can definitely beat the original Zheng comfortably with his power. So, I don't mind dragging this on. I'll suffer rejection worst come to worst, and I just need to leave this plane. But you? You'll die without a place where you can get buried if you lose. You're at a completely situational disadvantage. I said this long ago. You were certain to lose when you treated your team members as chess pieces. How many times stronger are your members than Team China's? Aren't both sides suffering grievous losses in the end? Didn't you want to know what the so-called feelings are? The conclusion of the final battle that's about to come will be your best answer. I'm about to attack. The two Xians looked silent at the other, their expressions eternally so cold and severe. Only the expression of Zhang Xiaoxiu was somewhat panicked. She wasn't one of the two concerned parties, nor was she the unfeeling Xian. In this peak-level battle, and as the most important weapon, her emotions would definitely be worried and anxious. A trace of ill premonition existed as well. Could it be that I'll have to use that last bit of causality points in reserve? But, it'll be difficult to predict whether he and I will end up dying or living. The two Xians had finally unleashed their full power. One rang the bell of the East Emperor, the fluctuations spreading for kilometers around, with space and time freezing in this area. The only one unaffected was Zhang Xiaoxiu with her God Seal board. The God Seal board trembled as multiple streaks of Xian's power of faith were fired. Causality was reversed, and not a single landed on Clone Xian, all hurtling into the distant ground. Clone Xian finally escaped the Bell of the East Emperor's imprisonment with the God Seal board's operation, before firing back multiple streaks of power of faith, though they were immediately extinguished by the Bell of the East Emperor's fluctuations. The two began their intense shootout once again, however, whether by intention or accident, the two slowly approached the two Zhengs battlefield. What a boring fight. Both sides know each other inside out, and the gap in strength isn't too large, and both are exact copies. Deciding victory in a short time will be hard. Zheng, persevere. The last part of the scheme is about to arrive. Xian looked silently at far away, before redirecting all his attention on Clone Xian. The two fought as they flew, having already covered several kilometers and gotten even close to the Zhengs. At the same time, Zheng was clashing with his clone's primordial dusk, Universe Armageddon. Strangely, despite being able to tear through space, the black hole was as easily manipulated by Clone Zheng as the black flames were. As Zheng charged at him with chaos's power and speed, countless specks of dust-sized black holes appeared around him. Tiger Soul was continuously robbed of its power and speed as it struck them. However, the black hole specks were unchanging whether in shape or size. Zheng didn't dare to continue using his body to attack, seeing this, instead opting to use Tiger Soul to hack at the ground in between the two. I don't believe these black hole specks can even defend the area below you. Even if it responds to my intent and can automatically defend, the defense still has its own movement speed, right? My chaos. Just as Zheng landed on the ground and split open the ground, he was just about to jump in when Clone Zheng, who was previously unable to even respond to his speed in destruction, actually viciously buried his fist in Zheng's stomach with a power and speed equal to that of Chaos, Genesis Splitter. No matter how tough his dragon transformation was, the impact of this fist still left a slight depression in his stomach, while also sending him flying over 1,000 meters away, causing him to dig out a deep trench in the ground far away. That's my power. How could you have the power of Chaos, Genesis Splitter? Wait, black hole, absorption. Can your black holes absorb power and convert it into your own? Zheng felt a sweetness in his throat, and forcefully swallowed back the blood before looking at Clone Zheng and asking in surprise. Although it's a miniature black hole, it's still not that power that's the most violent and absolute in the universe. Otherwise, in the instant the black hole formed, we would all have been instantly sucked inside and churned into the most basic atoms and quarks. Do you actually want to see that power? Clone Zheng himself seemed to be surprised as he looked at his hands. Even if it was only a little bit, the power absorbed from Zheng was still that of Chaos, Genesis Splitter's power and speed. This level made even Clone Zheng shocked. As his words fell, Clone Zheng's foot stepped downwards, creating the same ridiculous scene Zheng would make every time he moved. The ground cracked apart, while the person himself had already crossed over 1,000 meters to approach Zheng. However, Zheng dodged to the side. Although Zheng had exceptional reaction speed, he could no longer attack without the opponent responding like before. Clone Zheng gave a slight wave of his hand, and countless small black hole specks had already shrouded the two within. Zheng was surrounded in all directions by them, and could no longer dodge even if he wanted to. Watch closely. This is Primordial Dusk's true appearance after having absorbed power. Clone Zheng waved his hand again, and the floating black hole specks congregated around the largest speck, the suction force of which began to climb. Within a breath of time, Zheng could feel him slowly being pulled into the air, where a basketball-sized lump of distorted space was forming above his head. The lump of distorted space was different from the black holes before. Looking inside, Zheng could see space crumbling and reforming constantly. If before, the black holes could be likened to being idle, the black hole now would be described as being active. The difference in their suction power was such that they couldn't be spoken of in the sentence. Zheng gave his dragon wings a flap, forcibly stabilizing himself. But as the pull gradually increased, he felt some resistance even with Chaos, Genesis Splitter. It had to be known that this class of power was that of Chaos, Genesis Splitter, far beyond that of destruction. To feel resistance even with this power showed how enormous the pull of that distorted space was. But, this could be my chance as well. Zheng's heart leapt as he noticed the number of black hole specks had decreased as they combined to form distorted spaces. A pathway to Clone Zheng had slowly formed. Although there were two distorted spaces defending him, it wasn't a path of despair to Zheng. With no time to think carefully, Zheng began to gather the power in his body. He had already used Chaos, Genesis Splitter for over a minute at this point, and was near reaching the limits of his body. Even with the skill he had just learned in Lord of the Rings, he couldn't perpetually maintain this state. Thus, this one chance could very well be his last chance. In a short 0.something seconds, Zheng flew up from his original position, the enormous force easily letting him bypass the black hole specks and distorted spaces. However, at the final two distorted spaces guarding the pathway, he used his wings to shield himself from them. A horrifying tearing force was emanated from those distorted spaces in an instant, seemingly even more enormous than what Chaos, Genesis Splitter's burden caused. The two dragon wings were abruptly ripped off from his back, while Zheng used sorrow to escape the tug of the distorted spaces. Even Tiger Soul was dropped onto the ground in this period of time, but Zheng had finally charged to his clone. Caught you. I know what you're bearing, but I can't not tell you that the path you're taking is wrong. I can't tell you what's right, but I shall defeat you, I shall surpass you. That's because what I bear is so much more important than all that hatred, insanity, and negative emotions you bear. I can definitely surpass you. Zheng grabbed onto Clone Zheng. Disregarding whether his body could still use the power of chaos, Genesis Splitter, he simply frenziedly landed punches on his face. With one hand grabbing onto Clone Zheng, he wasn't even given the chance to get sent flying. Again and again, blows rained on the important organs of Clone Zheng's body. His stomach was destroyed first, followed by his heart and chest, then his arms. Just as Zheng was about to demolish his brain, he suddenly saw a cold sneer on his clone's face. Surpass me? With what? Exactly. Your power? Your narrow-mindedness? Your conviction? Clone Zheng lifted his head and roared with laughter, as his leg kicked out, unleashing a kick on Zheng's stomach that rivaled his chaos in power. At the same time, countless enormous forces pulled at Zheng from behind, dragging him towards the distorted spaces inch by inch. It was many times larger than before, and even his chaos tier power was unable to forcibly escape it. Watch clearly. This is the gap between our capacities. Black flames ignited on Clone Zheng's body, and he slowly began to recover to his original state. He silently extended a hand, and Zheng finally saw clearly what was on the surface when he moved his body. A very thin layer of black membrane was sticking to his skin. Every attack before had actually been powering up his primordial dusk, universe Armageddon, to the point where now the distorted spaces were unstoppable. I lost? I'm going to lose. Despite bearing my comrades' faith and sacrifice, the conviction they've given me? Am I still going to lose after that? Zheng's body began to struggle madly, as he intended to break free of the distorted space's pull. Even though it wasn't a true black hole, his chaos, Genesis Splitter, especially when he was gradually unable to use it, was unable to overcome it. Zheng. I don't have much time left. The consumption will get especially huge after my light of the soul fuses with your body. Defeat your enemy in one strike. Also, leader, thanks for all the care you've shown all this time. Fighting with everyone has been the happiest days of all my memories. Everyone, thank you. Just as Zheng's heart was filled with despair, a clear female sounded next to his ear. The voice sounded like Zhao Yingkang's. Yet, why was she making an appearance here? Also, no human could survive in the area for kilometers around due to the pull of the distorted space. How did she sneak up on him? Before Zheng could come up with an answer, he felt something cool and refreshing enter his body. It was a feeling difficult to describe. It felt like a mere instant had passed, and yet an eternity at the same time. A turbulent airflow burst out of his body that stopped the pull from the distorted spaces, allowing him to move hundreds of meters away with a light tap of his feet. After which, Zheng stood there in shock. Is this your level, my clone? I can feel every atom, the energy circulating in my body and the trajectory of everything in the universe. This is the level you're at? The late fourth stage which approaches the fifth stage. Zheng looked at his hands, before gazing at Clone Zheng and asking. Clone Zheng didn't seem to be surprised that Zheng broke free, and fused together all the distorted spaces into one with a wave of his hand, positioning it in front of him. You broke through? In this juncture between life and death, you managed to break through to a level above humanity? No, your body has someone else's light of the soul. Also, only an incomplete light of the soul could fuse so quickly with someone else's in such a short time. Right, he set it up so. Otherwise, how could you survive that attack just now with your power? Right, the late fourth stage lets me feel psyche fluctuations only psyche force users should be able to. My comrades, Zheng looked silently at the numerous ropes on his wrist. Apart from Xian, Lu Yu, and Junshins which had yet to fly over, the rest of the team had all passed away. There was also a message left in Ian's rope, but Zheng didn't have the mood to take a careful look at it, with all his attention currently being directed on his one true enemy. I now have the qualifications to fight you, my clone. For me who's bearing so much, I can't lose to you again. I will surpass you this time. Zheng grit his teeth, and Tiger's soul flew into his hand when he beckoned to it. To someone of the late fourth stage who had taken a peep at the domain of energy, such parlor tricks were practically instinctive. Also, with the control of infinitesimal control now reaching the level of atoms and energy, the power of his techniques had been boosted far beyond imagination. Zheng's leg made a slight movement, and the result was no longer as crazy as before. Now the soil didn't even rise the slightest bit, but Zheng's speed was still as fast as before. The current Zheng was still maintaining chaos, Genesis Splitter. One of greatest changes of the late fourth stage was the infinitesimal control over energy granted. It allowed mastery over all things. If there was energy, the collisions of two types of energy could be maintained perpetually as long as the body's limit wasn't exceeded. That means that the current Zheng no longer had a time limit for chaos, Genesis Splitter. But so what? Clone Zheng's primordial dusk, universe Armageddon had infinite might and was perfect in defense and offense. It would even absorb an attacker's power, turning the distorted space even more powerful. This was more or less a skill and technique only saints would have, and it was unexpected he could create it at the late fourth stage. It was no wonder that he was crowned the strongest. Zheng's leg burst into action as he charged at Clone Zheng. He reached the distorted space with shocking pulling force first, which Clone Zheng split into dozens in response. Apart from some revolving around him, the remainder flew at Zheng. Zheng didn't dare allow his body to come into contact, instead using Tiger Soul to welcome one of them. There was a boom as the distorted space was actually cleaved into nothingness without the slightest trace left. Zhen didn't pause as he erased a few more. It seemed if this carried on, he would obtain victory as long as he depleted all of Clone Zheng's distorted spaces. Ah yes, the late fourth stage. Your attacks can now penetrate into atoms and energy, reducing it to nothing in one blow. If that saber hits me, even Sin Flames can no longer heal me. What a pity, what a pity. Do you still feel you have a chance when you've only reached it now and with someone's aid at that? Don't tell me that after I lured you into hitting a few times, you're overestimating yourself. Clone Zheng sneered coldly in response as the distorted spaces fused back together, creating a 2-meter wide distorted space that shrouded him within. Zhen no longer had any distorted spaces around him. Using black flames to simulate a black hole, then transform it into distorted space after enough power is absorbed. If more power is infused, the distorted space will become a true black hole. If you had this strength at the beginning when black flames were still in the process of simulating a black hole, I may really have lost to you. But now, this battle shall finally end. Clone Zheng shook his head as the loneliness in his eyes intensified. Idiot. Believe in your so-called conviction. Believe in the hopes those weaklings entrusted to you. Believe in what is obviously the weak mind of hypocrites. You simply haven't matured to the level I hoped for. Forget it, what's the point of keeping you around? It wasn't clear if Zhen had heard these words. He grit his teeth as he slashed at the distorted space outside Clone Zheng. However, this strike didn't break through technique with force like before, vanquishing all it touched. Instead, like a clay bowl falling into the sea, all of that enormous force continued to deplete while the distorted space swelled up. Zhen only withdrew his blade and retreated when the distorted space was about to touch him, but it was already too late. The distorted space abruptly shrank inwards, converging into a needlepoint-sized pitch-black point 2 meters in front of Clone Zheng's chest. Then, an indescribable pull burst out. The ground was rent apart and the soil rose up. The clouds in the sky were pulled to the ground. Although Zhen, who was closest to it, could resist it with great difficulty, the power in his body gradually vanished. In at most a few more seconds, he would be swallowed up by this tiny black hole, by this power called primordial dusk, universe Armageddon. My comrades. Turning the clock a minute back. Xian and Clone were already approaching the domain of the Zheng's fight, and they could already see that distant cylindrical pillar-shaped battlefield from their position in the sky. However, the two didn't seem to have the intention to advance any further as they frenziedly exchanged blows there. Apart from Xian aging, even Clone Xian with his God Seal board to reverse causality was aging as well. They were like lamps about to be snuffed out. Xian suddenly put down his gauze pistols and stopped attacking, only using his Bell of the East Emperor to deflect a few streaks of power of faith. He asked, "For what do you live for, my clone?" "I want to surpass it." Clone Xian put down his gauze pistols as well, nodding. "Surpass what? What about feelings? You and I both know very well what it is I want to surpass. It doesn't have that beauty if it's said out loud. As for feelings, that's just a sign of being corrupted by immortals' wisdom, or the excuse weaklings give themselves when running away. Are you not even clear on this, my original? Or are you already corrupted by Team China?" Xian seemed to recall something upon hearing that. After a long time, he said, "You just want to surpass? Still remember when Father brought us to see the stars? That kind of thing. My original, you really have been corrupted. Based on what I know, the rules of survival for Team Devil is far superior to Team China. Perhaps for normal human societies, they need to rely on being hypocritical and weak to placate the masses. But this thinking will be a burden to the chance to surpass the chess player." Clone Xian shook his head as he raised his gauze pistols and said to Xian, "A human's feelings carry infinite possibilities. For us who went through entirely different environments, you still follow my original methods and thinking. Only the maximization of benefits matter. I, however, have experienced much and know that their potential can't just be expressed in numbers. Like sacrifice. I'm sure no one in Team Devil knows what that means, right?" Xian slowly closed his eyes upon seeing his clone raise his pistols. Using the special characteristic of the Bell of the East Emperor, he instantly located Zheng. The current Zheng was using his saber to chop at the distorted space while the real black hole formed. At the same time, he noticed the dense tangle of ropes on Zheng's wrist. Comrades. Such a foreign and yet familiar word. It feels, rather warm. Xian, do you want to see the stars? The stars. That was the instant he had truly understood the world with his own eyes. The world wasn't just about numbers and data, something seemed to have been unlocked in his heart at that moment. His white-haired father passed away. That sadness had clutched at his heart. However, he wasn't able to convey or express it, or cry. That had been painful and he never wanted to experience it again. The people of Team China really were naive to speak of kindness and comrades. Did they not know the people who liked to betray others the most tended to be comrades themselves? But what was this moving feeling? Everything he had seen and heard since his revival, something stronger than war buddies, fighting side by side and living and dying together, was that what a comrade was? Whether it was Zheng intentionally whacking him, Cheng Xiao intentionally speaking ill of him behind his back, the people around him showing caution, or, they all gave him a warmth similar to the first time he had seen the stars, like he had seen one of the most genuine facets of the world. Thus, for this warmth and genuineness obtained with difficulty, he would remove all obstacles before him at all costs. Xian used the bell of the East Emperor to feel the psyche imprints left on the ropes, his comrades' pure and genuine feelings at the moment of their passing. Several moments later, 2 clear drops of tears flowed out from his eyes. I'm crying. Ah, so this is how it feels to cry. And tears. What is this? Xian was shocked as he rubbed the teardrops, muttering. This is because you're weak. It's proof of you being corrupted by immortal's wisdom. Clone Xian was shocked as well, but his expression didn't change. No. These are the tears of my desire to live on with everyone. Xian's head abrupt shot up, a determination hitherto unseen in his eyes, even when he was wearing his hypnotism glasses. At the same time, a rune surfaced in his eyes, scanning Zheng's battlefield. Then, he pulled down the bell of the East Emperor that had been floating above his head. My clone, didn't you want to know what the purpose of gathering so much energy in the bell of the East Emperor was for? Let me tell you, there's a reliable bond called comrades, an oath worth my life called fighting side by side, the greatest gap between us called feelings. Zheng, this is my final assistance to you. Win. As his words finished, power of faith that was unrivaled in radiance emanated from his body. The power of faith in Clone Xian's muzzles were like fireflies to the sun. Then, all of Xian's power of faith poured into the bell of the East Emperor as he hurled it at Clone Xian. Comrades. Or, family. With you all around, it felt quite warm. As the bell of the East Emperor was flung out, Xian's body dispersed like ash, the only trace left of him some specks of ash. The only thing left to prove that a man named Xian existed, the bell of the East Emperor, flew along its trajectory and shot towards Clone Xian. As Clone Xian's 2 streaks of power of faith slammed into it, they utterly vanished like clay bowls falling into the sea. Not only that, but the bell expanded in size the closer it got to Clone Xian. Regardless of how the God Seal board distorted causality, it was unable to divert the bell. Zhang Xiaoxiu was still frenziedly using causality points as the bell collided lightly with Clone Xian. The God Seal board actually ripped into 2, as the bell vibrated slightly and Clone Xian disintegrated. Is that so? I lost. What are feelings? No. No. I still have causality points left. Xian. Even if I die, you have to live. Zhang Xiaoxiu went mad, not avoiding the bell of the East Emperor as she inserted a large quantity of causality points into the 2 sections of the God Seal board. Perhaps it was because of the causality backlash due to the God Seal board being ripped apart, but in the instant Zhang Xiaoxiu was struck by the bell, a scar appeared in space that sucked the 2 sections of the God Seal board within as well as Clone Xian and Zhang Xiaoxiu's remains. The bell of the East Emperor quickly shrunk into palm size once again after killing the 2, winking out of existence. When it reappeared, it was ramming into the small black hole 2 meters in front of Clone Zheng. 2 similarly immense powers clashed. One could suppress the world, while the other was an embodiment of the most violent and ultimate power in the universe. There was no explosion or shockwaves in this exchange, merely a clear ringing sound of a bell. A small crack had formed on the ancient bell as it fell to the ground while the needlepoint-sized black hole vanished as well. The 2 Zhengs remained frozen until a rope fluttered to Zheng's wrist. He directed his attention to the rope, carefully experiencing the most genuine and moving psyche imprints of his comrades. Is that so? Xian cried. That fellow finally has feelings. Zheng muttered, not even looking at Clone Zheng while he shut his eyes. Chu Xian? Was he dragged down by all of your weak cowardice? The tragedy of Chu Xian the Strong. He even created such a great chance for you before he died, giving you an infinitely small chance to beat me. What a tragedy, what a regret, hypocrites. Clone Zheng smiled coldly, not saying much as infinite amounts of black flame appeared around him. They congregated again to form that unrivaled violent power. Even if Zheng wouldn't slowly infuse power for him, he could do it himself, except that it would take a while longer. Zheng ignored him, even stopping the flow of the refined chi and magic on his body, silently experiencing the psyche imprint of every rope. After a while, warm tears began to spill from his eyes. Fool. You're crying too? Because those losers dragged you down? Because you're afraid of death? You simply haven't matured to the point you can rival me, you weak-hearted coward. Clone Zheng's cold laughter intensified as he created countless black holes. In the core area of it, several distorted spaces were starting to form as well. As long as he could convert them fully, he would have the initiative to stand in an unbeatable position. No. These tears are from courage, power, trust, and my comrades. You won't get it? From the moment you stepped on a road opposite of mine, you could never understand. I will beat you. Chaos, Genesis Splitter. Zheng's head snapped up as his refined chi and magic began to frenziedly mix once again. The enormous power of Chaos, Genesis Splitter began to form in his body again. He had never been wrong. His conviction, his dreams, his comrades, his courage. That was the source of his power. So, at this moment, he had to win and seize the crown of the strongest for himself. You can never beat me. As long as you don't abandon that hypocrisy of yours, as long as your heart remains weak, you never shall. Primordial Dusk, Universe Armageddon. Clone Zheng seemed to have gone mad as he pushed black holes and distorted spaces that carried unimaginable pull at Zheng. The force was so enormous that it wasn't inferior even when matched against Chaos, Genesis Splitter. Then, the two's power collided. Zheng's body began to spin within the maelstrom, the all formed from the might of Chaos, Genesis Splitter able to pierce through diamond. He used this method to pass through the strongest points of the distorted spaces. Even though he lost much flesh and blood on his arms and legs, and even a whole arm, he still managed to pierce through the region of distorted spaces. Before Clone Zheng could manipulate them again, Zheng used the last sliver of chaos, Genesis Splitter, to slash at Clone Zheng's chest. A destruction on the atomic level and energy level acted upon him, and the black flames no longer kindled. My comrade, Xian, once told me that how powerful someone is based on the person themselves and how they use their skill. Zheng said softly. Is that so? I already knew that long ago, and my Xian never told me that. Clone Zheng's eyes were no longer bloodshot, as he suddenly flapped his bat wings and flew to the edge of the pillar, quietly looking down. Perhaps, it's because I lost the thing most precious to me, that I particularly want to ruin it when I see others have it. I really want to have the comrades you have, and the woman I love. Clone Zheng raised his head towards his original. The crown of the strongest is yours. I won't help you. Whatever the future it is you want, seize it yourself. For some reason, Zheng suddenly felt a sense of gloominess. I don't need your help. I shall unlock the future myself. I shall not fear any enemy. Clone Zheng silently turned his head away, muttering, Luo Gondo isn't dead yet. Your two team members are about to be attacked. Go. Save your conviction. If you continue to carry this unshakable conviction, maybe, just maybe, you can challenge him. The future. I'll be entrusting it to you. As his words fell, Clone Zheng's body jumped down, black flames igniting and slowly spreading from his chest. However, it was of no use, as the black flames rose dozens of meters while Clone Zheng's body gradually turned into an ash that dispersed. At the end, a ball of flame was all that was left of the man who was once titled the strongest. Zheng watched until his clone completely vanished. He didn't utter a word. After a long while, he hurriedly took out his sky stick when he heard a howl below. He flew out of the pillar. He realized that the light of the soul Yinglong had granted him was completely depleted, but he still maintained his late fourth stage. Did he enter it unknowingly? Or could this be maintained for a while? But whatever. He had the most personal experience now, and it was only a matter of time until he truly entered and consolidated his late fourth stage. But now, it was more important to save his two team members. Lu Yu and Junchen were 1,000 meters above the EVA. They were shuddering with every step the EVA took. This monster could still repair itself after taking so many consecutive attacks. Although it was walking slower, it could be seen regenerating. At this rate, it would return to its pre-explosion state sooner or later, or even better. At that time, these two rookies would die even if they hid in the sky. Let's run. While the monster isn't healed, we'll use the sky sticks to fly as far as possible. At that time, it won't be able to find us. Maybe we'll survive this final battle. Junchen suddenly said. No. Lu Yu suddenly looked at Junchen. Big brother Junchen, remember what big brother Wang Xia said before dying? We're going to become the members of the strongest team. So, we need to have the courage to bear the responsibility and burden of this title. I won't run. Run if you want to, big brother. Do as you please. I will become strong. Until the time I am worthy of this title. Junchen couldn't do anything but glare at the EVA that was walking faster and faster when Lu Yu said this so seriously. It was jogging along now, and once his light of the soul recovered, they would. I'm scared of death, but how can I abandon a kid and run away alone? It's just dying anyway. All I'll do is add a few days to my lifespan if I run. Lu Yu, if you want to become strong, we'll do it together. Junchen grit his teeth as he said to Lu Yu, determined. But before Lu Yu could reply, a voice spoke ahead of him. There'll be a chance. You all will surely have the chance to grow stronger until you are worthy of the title of the strongest team's members of my team China. The two were shocked, and looked all over to find a man below who was before the EVA. He was covered in blood with an arm ripped off, while the other wielded Tiger's soul. It looked insignificant compared to the EVA. Before the two recovered from their surprise, the man casually swung his saber and the EVA was suddenly bisected, one half dusted. Then, the man took out a sky stick and flew to Lu Yu and Junchen. Big brother Zheng. Leader. An indescribable sense of relief filled them as soon as they saw Zheng. Their legs felt like jelly, and they wished they could just collapse there and then. Zheng gave a smile, all right, let's go. We still have to go to the 7th underground laboratory. It's at the valley there. We still have a bitter battle there. Perhaps we'll have to face many mess there that can use explosion and destruction. 1. The two didn't respond to Zheng's words, but Junchen pointed to the EVA below that was beginning to repair itself. Leader, he's not dead yet. Your attack just now turned part of him to dust. How about another strike? No. My comrades are still sleeping. We need to save them. The Chronicles of Narnia, was it? The conclusion of the final battle, our future, and his existence. We can't end the final battle like this. We still have to battle for a long, long time. Get stronger as soon as possible, until you are worthy of being a member of the strongest team. I'll tell everything, from beginning to the end, to you two then. Zheng looked at the EVA beneath his feet, before pointing forward, let's go. We'll create our own future, a future where we are truly free.